like to do tonight is to present a map of the power plants that are located in the Last Creek Valley and the Blackstone River Valley, and to show the residents how Thompson and this whole area will be significantly impacted by Burrowville and Killing.
Sure.
So I've just started this actually, and I want to present it, finish it in the next few days for the Killingley Valley Power Plant meeting. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
So anyways, what these circles demonstrate is the significant impact radius of each power plant, and each radius is 12 miles from the center, all right? And before we talk about the power plants, I first want to just point out the different dots on here. The black dots and the circles obviously are the different power plants, and all these power plants are on the Algonquin gas line, except for the Lisbon power plant, which is a trash burning power plant. And we're going to talk about each power plant and the megawatts that each power plant produces, all right? But before we talk about that specifically, what I did, and I've only had time to do this area for this meeting, but eventually I plan to mark these areas as well. All the red dots show all the schools within Thompson, Putnam, and Killingley. And then I was able to, I also showed one of the schools in Gloucester and 3 of the schools in Burrowville. I haven't had time to add this corner, and I hope to do that in the next few days. This green dot, anyways, the green dot is under this, but there's right where my pen is, right here, would be Day Kimball Hospital, and I thought that was important to know. And if anybody in the audience has information about some of the other surrounding hospitals that we can include on this, I think that would be important. All right, so anyways, now what I'd like to do is talk about the different power plants that are impacting the Blackstone River Valley, which is in through the Massachusetts, Rhode Island area, and then the Last Green Valley, which is the Massachusetts, Connecticut area. All right, and we're going to start with the outliers. There's a power plant in Charlton that is gas run and produces 360 megawatts of power. There is a power plant, this is Charlton, Massachusetts. There's a power plant in Lisbon, Connecticut, which, as I said, runs on trash, and that produces 15 megawatts of power, all right? So I want you to keep those numbers in mind, because that will give you some reference as far as how big some of these other power plants are, and the 2 that they want to build are very big power plants. So before we get to our immediate area, I want to point out this area. This is in Massachusetts. It includes the towns of Medway, Milford, and Bellingham. And just within those 3 towns, there might be one other town in there. Anyways, just those 3 towns, they have 4 power plants on the Algonquin gas line already. They've been operational since the early 1900s. They've been operational since like 1990, 1991, 1992. All right, and those power plants, I just represented one circle back here because otherwise it gets a little too murky to read. Theoretically, we could have 4 more circles right here. So the gas power that's being produced in this part of the Blackstone River Valley is one power plant's producing 360 megawatts, another power plant's producing 578 megawatts, another power plant's producing 178 megawatts, and then another power plant is producing 123 megawatts. One of those power plants is actually not gas, it's actually, I believe the Medway power plant is an oil burning power plant, which produces far more emissions and pollution. So anyways, keep that in mind as we move down here. Now the next power plant we have in the Blackstone River Valley is right here, okay? And this is the circle. This is Blackstone, I believe it's called Blackstone Energy Center, but I'm not sure. They produce 578 megawatts, and that is a fracked gas power plant. All right. Then we have this circle here, and this represents Ocean State Power and Ocean State Power 1. Those are two individual power plants on the same site in Burrowville, Rhode Island. And Ocean State Power produces 254 megawatts. Ocean State Power 1 produces 254 megawatts as well. So that's a total of 550 megawatts plus or minus. So that's this circle here. The next power plant in our backyard is Lake Road Generating in Dayville, Connecticut. That is a gas power plant. And I'm not sure if these are all running on fracked gas. I assume so because they're all feeding off the Algonquin gas line. But either way, they're all gas power plants. This is the 12-mile radius for Lake Road Generating. It produces 840 megawatts of power. All right, so this is what our area is dealing with. And if you actually measure from where Killingly Lake Road Power Plant is to where Blackstone is, that's 22 miles, the way the crow flies. If you measure from Killingly to the furthest point in Medway, that's 30 miles. So right now, within a 30-mile tract of land, not including the outliers, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 power plants. We already have 8 power plants in a 30-mile tract of land.
There's one in Millbury, Mass.
Oh.
That runs on trash.
Okay.
Right off of Route 20.
Could you direct the comments up here?
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll add it.
Okay.
And
A
after
little more
this,
pollution.
and after this is done, I mean, feel free to have a conversation,
Yeah.
you know, with Renee after, if you have an unanswered question after we move on.
So what I want to do now is add the Killingly power plant that's proposed, and it's called the Killingly Energy Center, and that's 550 megawatts, and that is right here. All right, and you can see that if Killingly does approve this second power plant, and these two power plants are within less than a 1 mile, I believe, distance of each other. And you can see that within a 3/4 mile distance to a 3 mile distance, there are many schools in this area. All right, so I think we need to really keep that in mind. And Day Kimball Hospital is less than 3 miles from these power plants as well. All right, and then we're going to add, just to make it more interesting, the 1,000 megawatt power plant going up in Burrowville. And not only is it one of the largest producing power plants in New England, doubling the output of all these power plants, all right. It also has the, if they draw water from the MTBE, contaminated well in Pascaud, we're going to be dealing with the airborne and water effects of the MTBEs. And that one goes right here. All right. So, where does Thompson sit in all of this? Unfortunately, this is Thompson. And when you count the circles, I believe I counted 5 circles and maybe more. I'd have to recount them. Let's see, we've got the Ocean State Power Plant that affects Thompson. This is Thompson, right? We've got the Burrowville Power Plant that potentially could affect Thompson. We've got the 2 Dayville power plants that affect Thompson. And we have the outer aspect of Charlton that affects Thompson. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 power plants that are going to all be impacting Thompson, and we're within the significant impact radius of 5 to 12 miles. So I think as a town, we really need to keep this in perspective and think logically about how this is going to affect us as a town, our health, our water, our air, our land. The other point I wanted to make was that all these power plants are major players and major producers of electricity. Lisbon is only producing 15 megawatts. And when you look at, like, many of the hospitals have power plants, many of the colleges have their own little power plants, but they're only producing 2 or 3 megawatts, all right? So this gives you some we've all driven by the power plant on 395 in Lisbon, and you see this huge stack, and they're producing 15 megawatts. So when you compare 15 to 550 to 840 to 1,000 to 254, 254, and all these others, we're talking about a major, we're going to be within, 12 miles of 3 huge power plants feeding New England. And this power isn't necessarily coming to Thompson or to Connecticut. It's going into the grid, into the New England grid, and feeding other states, Rhode Island being one of the primary players, because right now, all the power that's being produced in Killingly, to my knowledge, is being sent to Rhode Island until 2017. So again, I think we have to keep that in mind. And my concern is, I know nobody wants a power plant in their backyard, but I feel like it's our responsibility to protect the Green Valley and the Blackstone River Valley, not only for us and our families, but for all of New England, because all these woods do clean the air, and they absorb carbon monoxide or dioxide? Dioxide. So again, I think we have to keep that in mind, and we need to educate ourselves. I don't think we should be, act in a highly emotional or a state of alarm, but we need to educate ourselves and talk to people, and then work together as towns collectively. So the last thing I wanted to end with was I just wanted to read what towns are impacted by Killingly, and then what towns are impacted by Burrowville. So the towns in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, which will be impacted by the new Killingly Energy Center and are already impacted by Lake Road, are Killingly, Putnam, Thompson, Woodstock, Pomfret, Brooklyn, Eastford, Canterbury, Hampton, Chaplin. Those are the towns in Connecticut that are currently being impacted by our power plants in Connecticut. Also, Foster, Rhode Island, Gloucester, and Burrowville. So all these towns sit within the 5 to 12 mile significant impact radius, all right? Now, the towns that are impacted by the Clear River Energy Center, which is Burrowville, and that's the 1,000 megawatt they want to put up, are Burrowville, Gloucester, Foster, North Smithfield, Woonsocket. Those are the Rhode Island towns. The Connecticut towns are Thompson, Putnam, Killingly, Woodstock. And then the Massachusetts towns are Webster, Dudley, Douglas, Sutton, Whitensville, Uxbridge, Blackstone, and Mendon. All right? And that doesn't even include the towns in this area, all right, that we were talking about, Medford, Medway, and Milford, because there are towns, you know, as far as Framingham that are impacted by these power plants. The other thing I wanted to point out that if these two power plants, Killingly and Burrowville, are both approved, there are going to be towns significantly impacted by the overflow, whatever you want to call it, of both power plants, both new power plants. And those towns in Rhode Island would be Burrowville, Gloucester, and Foster. And then the towns in Connecticut that would be impacted by both power plants would be Thompson, Putnam, Killingly, and Woodstock. All right? And as I mentioned before, according to this map, Killingly is impacted by at least 5 power plants already. So that has the potential to grow. So I think we need to keep this all in our minds. And the one last point I'd like to make, just for the record, is that I would hope that our state reps, both not only in Connecticut but also Massachusetts and Rhode Island, can all, you know, we're stuck because we're in a tri-state area, and I don't know if all the states are communicating with each other. But these two valleys cross 3 states. We all breathe the same water, and breathe the same air, and drink the same water. And so I would hope that our state officials are going to communicate about the tri-state area. And I really think that a environmental impact study needs to be done. Because to my knowledge, they're not doing one for Burrowville, and to my knowledge, they're not doing one for Killingly. And I think that we really need to think about our tri-state area and really preserving and protecting what we have, not only for us, but for all of New England. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do you want me to leave this here so people can look at it?
Okay. For the record, you are?
For the record,